All right, guys. Happy Sunday, April 24th. Taking a look at crude oil. What's going to happen at the open? I have no idea. Let's look at parameters. So, zoomed out, looking at Elliott wave, I would say important levels, meaningful levels, are 92, 93 to the downside and 116, 64 to the upside. If you think this is a wave 3 and this is a wave 4, and you need a target for a wave 5, I mean, the next fib up would get you to 145. Uh, so just say if you're a bull and you need a target, 145, 150. The top of that, the next fib up, which would be just insanity, would be like 154. So just call it 145 to 155. That's kind of a target zone based on the fibs, and of course it's all very subjective because it depends where you put those fibs, especially with the March 2020 disaster. It's hard to figure out where, but I played around with them so many times. I've changed them. I've reverted back. I put it back. I don't really know, but if it's either a 3 or a 5, one of the two, and I guess we'll find out eventually over time. But what I do like about Elliott wave is it gives you the parameters, so I don't necessarily need to know exactly what this is for my style of trading. I don't need to know this right now. I just need to know some parameters. So I would say 92, 93, and 116. I mean, I know that's a huge range, but just looking at a zoomed out version to get the lay of the land. So now let's zoom in one level and get some other levels. Okay, 109 is resistance to the top, and the same 93 is holding the bottom. So still pretty wide levels, right? 116, 109, and still 93 to the downside. Now let's zoom in again, get a little more micro, get a little more crazy. Look, I don't know how you want to count this. Is this a wave 4? Is it not a wave 4? Is it done? Is it not done? I don't know. So what I like to do is just measure stuff. That's all. Just measure stuff and then try to use Strat and the squeeze method to try to get some more clues. Because I don't need to know at this moment what is the larger structure doing. I just want to try to scalp and make a buck or two or 80 cents or whatever on some scalps. So here's what I find interesting. Let's just assume that this is a meaningful bottom. Maybe it's a wave 4, but let's just say that it's a meaningful bottom. And you had this impulse. 5 up, maybe, depending on how you count it. It's kind of a little weird, the proportions, but it's definitely impulsive. So let's just say that's 5 up. Let's say that's 1. And it went, look where it terminated, right into this resistance zone at 109. So let's just say that's a 1. And if that is a 1, you would look for a pullback. Typically, if looking for a wave 2, would be in these red fibs. But this is 5 waves. So had this been 3 waves into this zone, then maybe, well, and I think the reaction, if that were the case, this reaction maybe would have looked a little more impulsive. Kind of the way this reaction, similar idea, is if this is a meaningful low, the reaction, you should get a reaction. Well, you got a whatever $15 reaction over here, which was glorious. So over here, if that's 5 down, that may be an A wave. This is a B wave, got contained by the 618, maybe. So then I would look for, if the next one would be a C wave, it should be looking like impulsive. So far so good. So I throw a fib on there and call this a 1-2. This is so micro, it's kind of silly. Very unreliable. Actually, this whole, even at this scale, looking at this whole thing, it's somewhat unreliable because it's just chopping along correctively overall. But you get these little impulses, so I pay attention to them and try to trade it. So 5 down for an A, B wave bounce, 1, 2, here's the pivot. It's just getting below that now. And then the targets for that would be either 98 at a minimum, if this is going to be in a C wave, 98. But A equals C is 96.42. You've also got a 78.6 fib there for this being a wave 2, which would be reasonable. And you've also got, if it extends as a little micro 5 wave move to the 2618, you've also got a fib there. So that's kind of interesting that there's some confluence down here. Just call it 96. So if this comes down, I would love to see this come down and get below 98, 96, because then that would be somewhat of a like complete-ish looking structure if it can do that. And so I guess important parameters, if this is the case, is this pivot area. I want to see that hold, 102, 36. But man, at this scale, this is very unreliable. So again, but these larger sort of parameters I think would be in play because it could chop along, who knows? But if it follows this pinball of this nano degree, then maybe it's going to come down here. So there you go. And looking at the 4 hour strat, which is really the only one that I find really relevant at this moment, is you're going to want to see this 4 hour chart right here. We're coming down, right? So this 4 hour candle, which is this range right in here, this is the current 4 hour candle. So if it breaks the bottom, that's what you want. If you want to be short, you want to see this break the bottom at 101.06. And if it does come back up, I think a reasonable way to think of this is look for it to run into resistance at 102.22. And then the next level of resistance is 102.63. I know this is crazy micro, but if you're scalping futures, these are the parameters that I would be watching to see what happens. If it goes up, watch for it to run into resistance at 102.22. If that doesn't hold, then maybe it holds 102.63. If that doesn't hold, the next area of resistance is 103.50. Now that would get us above that pivot I just showed us in the Elliott wave speak. But hopefully this either opens and comes directly down, or if it comes up, it gets rejected at one of these three levels. If you have a bias to be short and come down and finish off this nice setup for a small short scalp, and then watch for the reaction at between 98 and 96. If that's going to happen, it could be a great long scalp after a short scalp. And then the squeezes, there's nothing really happening. There's a bunch of noise. When it's chopping like this, the squeeze is not so reliable. The squeezes are better to catch it when you catch a turn into a squeeze. So, I mean, there is a squeeze on the 4 hour. So I don't really think that's, if I'm looking for 98 to 96, that's not deep enough. If for this to really fire in either direction, the 4 hour gives a more meaningful directional price action on a 4 hour squeeze. So I'm discounting this just because of the environment of all this chop, and the squeezes have not been so reliable just because of the price action and the way it's behaving. So there's a legit squeeze on the 4 hour, but I don't know. I'm going to go with Elliott wave over these squeezes for the moment. And, the 15-minute technically is coming down. The histogram's coming down. The 1 hour is just chopping along. It's nothing reliable to the way I view the squeeze. I would just keep an eye on this 4 hour, because if it wants to look, if it chops in this range and prints another couple of dots on the 4 hour, and then it starts coming down and it fires, there's always a chance that there's more to this downside than I'm thinking, and then I'll reassess my thinking. If it breaks through 96 and keeps going with this squeeze firing short, what I would rather see is this chop along, come down here real quick. Because if it comes down to 98 or 96 quickly, like whenever it moves to do that, if it does it quickly, it can retain this setup for a long, which is really what I'm getting at. If it comes down to 98, 96, and it does it quickly, like with a wick maybe it prints inside for 4 hours, and then the next one is 4 hours maybe. But at some point, if it just spikes down suddenly, and it'll be able to retain these dots, it won't fire it. And so you can still hit the Elliott wave target. And then if you get an extreme bounce, this could actually fire long. So it's just something to keep in the back of my mind. I'm not, there's a whole lot of what ifs. But anyway, those are the parameters. That's what I'm watching. I wish I could be on at the open, but we'll just see. I'll be in a pit orchestra. Some guys will be watching NBA on their phone from the pit. I'll be watching Crude while I'm playing a show. Okay, guys, have a great one, man. Good luck to y'all. See ya.